There was a reason why I was in a black hole, emotionally speaking, when my relationship ended at the beginning of 2022. Because at that point, I had become abjectly horrible to everyone with whom I spoke. I was a nightmare. I was a problem. I was mean. I was awful. And every time I behaved that way towards those people, I felt the deepest sense of regret. And every time I did it, I felt like I was hitting myself. But more deeper than that, there was a existential thing occurring, and that is this black hole that I'm describing. Because I don't have a lot going for me. I don't have a high school degree. I'm not particularly successful in my local community. I am very physically awkward. I'm socially awkward, but I try to pass it off by making jokes about myself and jokes about the surroundings, especially geographic jokes. I'm a big fan of lore about states. I try to do little things to mitigate the, and this says so much about how I see myself, the harm of my existence. I try to do these things to be a little bit less bad and to come off as a little bit more passable. And with this lack of career that substantially improves the world in the way that people in IT have them, in the way that the construction workers who built this home that I live in and call my own have. I'm sure they feel a sense of purpose when they go home. The farmers who till the fields and grow the crops that we're eating, the inventors who innovate and create new vaccines, new computers, microchips, and so on, semiconductors, even the people who work on the assembly lines for the semiconductors, the people who are pioneering nuclear energy, who are pioneering fusion, who are trying to mine the moon for helium-3. These people are visionaries. And even if you're a small little functionary working within that broader institution that they exist in, even if you're working towards becoming one of those tiny functionaries who will ultimately work within that broader institution, you can go home at night and feel like you're doing something, like you are something. But I don't have any of that. I wasn't afforded the education. I wasn't afforded the parents who encouraged me to pursue said education, nor was I in an environment that would produce someone of good character and with stable mental health. But I exist nonetheless, and those circumstances are not an excuse to fail. And so I have to look at what I do have control over. If so much that is going on is things that I don't have control over, that happens to disproportionately negatively affect myself, then I ought not to negatively affect anybody else. I ought not to leave a big, negative, ugly trail in my wake. But that's what I did that year and the year prior, at the start of that year and in 2021. And it created this existential hell for me, this proverbial black hole that I resided in. Because the one thing that I had going for me, which was kindness to others, love, warmth, care, these things that I was able to do for my friends up to that point, in spite of my constant instability and general mental problems. I tried to lean on those things because I knew those were good things that I could do. I just didn't quite have the power and the will to fully implement those traits. Now I do. And that is after having been abjectly horrible to those people at that time and at certain prior times. But now, I am consistent. Over a year later, I am consistent in my warmth, kindness, trustfulness, in my ability to think before I make a decision, lack of impulsivity, in my ability to love and be warm, and be someone that people can go to and think, this is a good person, this is someone I can trust, this is someone I can rely on, this is someone who loves me, this is someone who makes it feel like things are all right. That's the role that I occupy. That's why someone who is very intelligent and wonderful was willing to marry me. Because in all of the most intimate moments, the most vulnerable moments that we've had together, the moments that have really tested our love, when I could have gone off the rails or she could have gone off the rails, I was able to take control of myself and be a man. And that's what people are looking for when they like me. The people who like me because I'm capable of being a man. I can withstand my emotions and do the right thing in spite of adversity, which is not what I was doing at that time. I can be kind and I can be warm, which is not what I was doing at that time. I can admit fault and admit when I was wrong, and I have no attachments to being right about myself or about anything, and so I'm very adaptable when given criticism, and it allows me to be warm with people. If I've hurt someone, I accept it. I repent, I apologize, and I adapt. These things, they're so easy for me to do, even though sometimes they're hard. But when I do them, it's the most rewarding thing that I can possibly do, because it's something I have control over. I can be kind, I can love, I can be warm, I can be patient, I can control myself. But that's within my purview. This other stuff, having a high IQ, building the next semiconductor, even working a lot of basic jobs. These are not just things I deeply struggle with. These things, and I don't want to say this with complete certainty because I want to keep trying and I don't want to give up, but a big part of me feels like those things are beyond my purview. I just feel like that person who fucks up, that person who struggles to do the things that everyone else admires. But hey, at least I can be nice to people. Gotcha. So mean. It's fucking raining. It's fucking raining. You can't see it, but for me, it is fucking raining. Oh my god, this heat wave has been insane. The heat wave has lasted so long. And now, I'm finally granted some reprieve. The rain is here, it's doing its thing, and it's beautiful. God, I have prayed for rain so many times, and He has answered my prayers. Sometimes I feel like I'm a coward, like I'm not good enough to defend my ideas, like few things that I truly believe in, I don't go to bat for them enough. And if I do go to bat for them, I don't go to bat for them hard enough. I'll approach them in this optics-focused, milquetoast way where I'll say part of the truth, but not the whole truth. And I think it's cowardly. When there's something that I believe in that also happens to be affecting the lives of millions of people today, I should be going to bat for it, and I should be going all the way. But I don't, because I'm scared, because I'm insecure, because even though I've encountered all those counter arguments that I've been given, either in the form of debate or by doing my own research and reading the many articles and books by people who disagree with me very strongly, I've looked at that data and still came to my conclusion. And I've assessed my conclusion objectively, trying to go over my own cognitive biases, my own biases in general, searching for fallacies within my argumentation. And I have adapted my positions. I've changed them. I've added some addendums to them in light of that new information. So it's not like I'm afraid of being proven wrong. I have my beliefs. They're set in stone. They're going to stay this way as far as these couple issues are concerned. But there's one issue in particular that I believe in more than every single other issue. And that happens to be the issue where I get the most cold feet when it comes to being challenged on. And I'll speak as though, almost as though I'm like a totally different guy than the person that I am. And it'll show for people who know me really well. And I need to change that. I need to stop being such a coward. Even if I get mad and get angry and passionate and upset, which I may very well become that. That's okay. That's human. It means I believe something. If it stunts my ability to debate at the time, I should get better at debating under pressure. But I can't hide my perspective. I can't let the terms of the debate be set by people who are wrong. I have to defend what I truly believe in. But if I'm not doing that, and right now I don't think I am sometimes, other times I'm not doing so adequately, I think that means I'm a coward. Look, my position on this issue has evolved a bit over time. I've come to think a variety of different things at a variety of different points, primarily because it's so complicated that sorting through all of the data necessitates an attitude that is forged in willingness to actually sort through all of that shit that ain't nobody got time to sort through. But I've done the sorting, and I've also done the rigorous philosophical exercise of attempting to put my position up against all my other positions and see if it's consistent. In the case of this gun thing, I think my new position is actually quite consistent with my other positions. Now, let me explain. I want to ban guns. I don't think they should be allowed. I think you should be able to have a very basic hunting rifle. A shotgun ought to be okay, but you need a license, you need to go through training, you need a mental health screening, you need a background check, you need to be deemed as someone with good behavior, and you need a valid reason to have it in the first place. Let's say you're a farmer. If there's boars, you need something to attack boars. If there is a bear attempting to invade your home, as in my country and the country above me, it happens semi-often, you can have a shotgun for that. You know, these are valid reasons. And the people who don't meet the criteria, they ought not to live in a place where boars and bears are attacking them. They can just suck it up. I mean, that's the cost of living in a society. You lose some privileges, you lose some freedoms in a way of... I got distracted for a moment. In pursuit of keeping all of us safe. And I think that's an adaptation that we can live with, because there's too many gun deaths, there's too many people dying. And I think the system that I'm advocating for here, vast majority of guns banned, only certain ones allowed, you need this permit and this massive background check and this training and this valid reason to get it, I think that would... all these gun deaths that are happening, I think that would keep them from happening, because if the data clearly shows that the less guns you have, the less people die from guns. And I'm not saying this should be gone altogether. Look, I grew up in a rural place, I understand the necessity of having one. But that's a valid reason. And a whole lot of people who have guns, I'll tell you, they do not have a valid reason. And many of them go into schools and massacre poor innocent children, malls, public places. These are evil things that people are doing with these weapons. And I understand that it's fun to shoot an AR-15. I've done it. It is very fun to aimlessly shoot an AR-15 into targets that you have set up on some rural land. I did that with my friend's gun. And I know how fun it is. And so if you want to have some fun, you better go to the gun equivalent of an arcade. I'm talking about a gun range. If you want to play with those toys, do it in that dedicated spot where they are licensed to allow you to use them, and then fucking use them at some targets. But you cannot take that gun home. You should not be allowed to take that gun home. And the core reason for this is because these are weapons that can harm others. We sell alcohol in this country at stores to individuals because we know that alcohol has the capacity to harm us, but we also know that if used responsibly, it has the capacity to enhance our lives in certain ways. And we leave that decision up to individuals to responsibly carry out their own life and make their own decisions. But these are weapons that can take someone's life, someone else's life, rather than your own. So it's not just about you at that point. It's also about other people. So recently there was a discovery of the first butchery site, 2.9 million years old, and it has sparked discussion about who made the first stone tools. That discussion is now being had again. But more interestingly, I think this rebukes one of the many interesting claims made by vegans, which is this notion that we aren't actually meant to eat meat. That if you look at modern humans today, they have to cook it, they have to put vegetables around it, and anything else we find appalling. Now, personally, I like to eat raw meat. A lot of Asian people like to eat raw meat. I do not find it appalling. But they're going to bring up the opinions of many people who have probably grown up in societies where cooked meat is the main way meat is consumed, and take their opinions as gospel and apply them to people who existed millions of years ago. It's quite silly, but in order to entertain the argument, to assume that what they're saying is true, that it is somehow unnatural for us to eat this stuff, I'd like to ask, why was the first butchery site found to be literally 2.9 million years old? If this was that unnatural of a practice for us, do you think we would have been doing it that long ago? I think this points to an uncomfortable fact for us today, the fact that some people will win and some people will lose. Some beings will win and some beings will lose. Animals, for better or worse, have been consumed by humans throughout all of our history and will continue to be consumed by humans throughout the rest of our history, because that is the way things are. I think we live in a society that is allergic to the concept of death, that the idea of death and suffering are things that we react to with so much revulsion and disgust, when in reality, death has been with us forever throughout many, many cultures. Death was treated as a fact of reality that you would share with your children from a very early age and not treat with any fear whatsoever. Historically, when a family member would die, the entire family would sit together and be with them as they were dying and grieve with each other as that was occurring. There were rituals that would be had to demarcate the transmigration of these spirits, or however they interpreted it at that time. But today, in modern society, we're terrified of this thing that has been with us throughout all of our history. And I think something like veganism can only come into existence in a society that is so firmly up its own ass that we would treat this natural process as something to be terrified of and avoided at all costs, because it makes us feel afraid. But what I tried to say in my initial video about veganism is that I'm not afraid of death. I just see it as getting in one car from another. So I've been thinking a lot lately about social status and about where people are in life and about how the things that they do, my wife is over there sighing, about how the things that they do affect the extent to which other people are willing to, I can just, why am I recording myself playing the game? I've been thinking lately about class dynamics, in particular, the way in which we treat people differently, not just based on class, but based on the behaviors that they exhibit while being from a certain class. It is permitted for someone with a PhD to, for example, engage in recreational drug use. It is somehow accepted for that person to do that thing. We see them do that thing and then say, okay, because they're a doctor, they magically are accepted to do this thing. That's just one example. But if you were to take someone doing the exact same behavior just as responsibly from a lower class, perhaps they have a less prestigious degree, perhaps they have no degree at all, perhaps they're in a precarious economic position, all of a sudden, it changes. All of a sudden, you are free to just unload all of the biases that you've been trained to have about people who engage in that behavior. You're free to unload them on that person. And I think it instills this feeling in people who don't really want to be from prestigious positions in the first place. It instills this feeling in them that they have to be in those prestigious positions, or they have to give off the impression that they could be at the very least. And it's this strange situation that I don't think, when our founding document literally says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the right to the pursuit of happiness, the right to life, the right to liberty, that these are inalienable things endowed to us by God, the idea that just because you're a poor farmer, you shouldn't attempt to pursue those things in whatever way you feel is necessary, but a university professor can. It doesn't make any sense. But these are the class biases that we have for a wide array of things. And we never question them, just because they are socially accepted. It's socially accepted to dehumanize people. It's socially accepted to shame people, just because they're from a different strata of person. The worst part about this game is having to wait around for the people to move so you can assassinate them. When I'm not recording, it creates this feeling of tensity in me that feels really good. It adds to the gameplay loop. But when I'm recording something, it just makes it tedious and annoying. Yeah, I mean, the amount of scrutiny that certain people get just for something that they do in their private time that does not affect their work life, their social life, their obligations to society, the amount of scrutiny that they get in spite of fulfilling all of those obligations, it's quite incredible. It's quite incredible. And they wouldn't if they were just from a prestigious position. And there I intentionally died. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a war on normal people, but it's way broader than Andrew Yang ever said it was. I feel like there's a war on normal people happening right now. And it starts with me. I don't know, man. I don't like bullying. I'm not a fan. I don't like people putting their nose where it doesn't belong. Because, like, all of the things that we associate with, like, you know, for example, if you're homosexual, in the past, people associated homosexuality with criminality, with being deviant in public, you know, indecent exposure, with various antisocial behaviors and they wanted to penalize those people for those antisocial behaviors, even though those were just things that they assumed applied to homosexuality, that no doubt certain homosexuals probably did or engaged in, but they broadly attributed the behaviors of a few to many, merely because it was socially accepted to hate that entire group of people. And when we talk about homosexuality, or when we talk about transsexuality, it's okay to make those comparisons and make that broader point that I just made. But with other marginalized populations, we can't. With populations of people who, you know, happen to do things that the state says that you can't do, or that society says that you can't do, all the while fulfilling the obligations to one's work and one's family, it makes no sense. But the shaming continues because it's socially accepted, and it's incredibly revealing. It reveals a lot about a person, because if you're principled, you won't engage in that shaming. If you truly believe the things that you say, you won't engage in that shaming. But the people who don't really care, who only care when it's homosexuality or women or transsexuality or whatever, because that's the current thing, they want to be in the loop, they want to be accepted by the big group, you know, they're okay to make that argument and agree with those arguments. But when it's these other groups of people that we feel perfectly fine to other, that they feel perfectly fine to other as a mass society, you know, not a peep. They don't say a word, even though the logic applies just the same. And so there's a deep inconsistency at the root of prejudice. And I would contend that all prejudice is bad, not just the prejudice towards certain people who make certain lifestyle choices or have certain immutable characteristics, but any prejudice you could harbor against other individuals who are not literally doing something wrong to you or someone else. I said I was going to film in here because it's empty. Yeah. I've gone mad. I've gone shark raving mad. I've gone bloody nuts. Who are you there? You've gone bloody nuts. Who are you there? You've gone bloody nuts. I don't actually... Is that what he says? I don't actually know if that's what he says. Is it? I don't even know. I get a concussion. I go to work for a meager salary that literally does not cover the cost of living. All the while, much of said salary goes to taxes that fund some of the most basic necessities of life, as in public transit and some worker protections. And then what you're left with is a high minimum wage, sure, but the effective wage is much lower, and that basic standard of living is met as far as transportation is concerned, as far as other quality of life measures are concerned, but you still can't make the rent because the rent is too damn high. You laboriously force yourself to get up every single morning as your body aches and is in pain from being on your feet, moving, bending, lifting, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. There's no reason. When the boss is making so much money for just sitting there and doing nothing, he could be paying me $25 for doing the same job, $30 for doing the same job. And at that point, I could afford a place to live. But that's not even the problem. The problem is not that I don't make enough, which I don't. The problem is not that the benefits aren't good enough, which they aren't. The problem is not that the taxes are too high, because they aren't, given what they go to. Take all of this into context, and then just think about the actual work you're doing. If my taxes were proportional to the wage I was getting, let's say I was making $30, the taxes are really high, they pay for all of that other stuff, my effective wage is high enough to live, and to live modestly, to have things that I want, to be in a place. I'm still lifting, bending, moving, jumping around, running around all day, exerting my body all day, putting myself in physical and mental stress all day. And those are the only jobs that hire me. As much as I try to be a cashier, as much as I try to stock shelves, these people are not having it. So what do? I clean the hell out of a lot of hotels, and my body dies a little bit every single day that I do it. And I say, why? When there's an open world out there, there is an open world ripe for the taking. Easy to sleep in, easy to explore, and there's plenty of excitement without any money. So, if just for that meager amount, they're going to make me do all of that I don't even want to do in the first place, I might as well live life large, dangerous, and free. I don't know a satisfying way to end a YouTube video. I'm just in my room, on the computer, on the phone, sleeping, eating. But a new member has been added to my party, and maybe I'll defeat the boss.